Hello and welcome to the Summer Program Planning Tools webinar series. This is part 1, Getting to Work on Summer Learning and the Summer Learning Toolkit. We're going to allow a minute for everyone to join the webinar. While we wait, please take a moment to complete the poll questions you see on the screen to tell us a little bit more about yourself. If you'd like, you can also say hello in the chat box you see in the lower left side of your screen. We'll be monitoring that throughout the webinar and posting information there as well. Again, so we're waiting for folks to join. Go ahead and take a minute to complete the poll questions that you see in front of you. Great, thanks everybody. It looks like we have a good mix of people here today. Welcome again. My name is Leslie Gabay-Swanston. I'm the Director of Program and Systems Quality at the National Summer Learning Association. Today is the first webinar in a 3-part series on summer planning, co-hosted by NSLA, the National After School Association, and the After School Alliance. Parts 2 and 3 will be coming up on March 28th and early April. We'll talk a little bit more about that later in the webinar. Today's webinar features the Getting to Work on Summer Learning report and the Summer Planning Toolkit that were developed with the support of the Wallace Foundation. Both draw on findings from the Foundation's National Summer Learning Project. Here's a quick overview of our webinar. First, we'll hear from Jennifer McCombs of the RAND Corporation and co-author of the Getting to Work on Summer Learning report. Then we'll get an introduction to the Summer Planning Toolkit from Hillary Ovek and Katie Wilsey. We'll have time for questions and answers from our speakers before wrapping up with some reminders and announcements. Some guidelines for the webinar. Please check the audio settings to adjust your audio. As I mentioned, we'll be using the chat box today for discussion to share information. If you have a question that you would like for us to answer live, however, please type it in the Q&A box so we can be sure to see it. We'll try to respond to quick questions as we go along, but if we don't get to your question, we'll have time during the Q&A portion. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jennifer McCombs. Dr. McCombs is a Senior Policy Researcher and Director of the Behavioral and Policy Science Department at RAND. Her research focuses on evaluating the extent to which public policies and programs improve outcomes for at-risk youth. She has expertise in several areas of education and child policy, including summer programming, out-of-school time, test-based promotion, accountability policies, educator development, and data-driven decision-making. So with that, I will turn things over to Jennifer.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Leslie. And thanks to all of you for attending and listening in today. So I am going to be presenting some key findings and recommendations from some of our work from the National Summer Learning Project. And so let me see. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to be presenting findings that are documented in Getting to Work on Summer Learning. And I am pleased to say that it is no longer forthcoming. It did come out in fall of 2018. So this document is available on the Wallace Foundation's website as well as RAND's website. It distills lessons about implementation that we've gleaned from the 6-year study of voluntary summer learning programs. in the 5 urban districts participating in the National Summer Learning Project. And those districts are Boston, Dallas, Duval County, Pittsburgh, and Rochester. The guidance presented in this document is based on 4 years of formative evaluation data and our outcome analyses that are derived from a randomized controlled trial. And so over the course of 4 summers, we gathered an extensive set of implementation and outcomes information. So we gathered more than 2,000 hours of observation data from classrooms, academic classrooms and enrichment activities, 1,200 surveys from summer instructors, 10,000 surveys from students, and we conducted 900 interviews with teachers, site leaders, and district administrators, in addition to collecting things like summer attendance data and several outcome measures. And the goal of this is all to really help others create effective programs, and we hope that you find this useful. So in this study, we are examining a specific type of summer learning program. So these are free voluntary programs that are offering academic instruction and enrichment activities, such as arts, music, rock climbing, hiking, and all sorts of other things to upper elementary school students. Some of these are managed by districts solely, while Boston and Dallas constructed managing partnerships between their local after-school intermediaries and the districts. And so all of them varied across in terms of curriculum, the specific curriculum that they utilized in enrichment activities they provided, but they all shared these common characteristics, one of which you see up here already, which is the fact that they are no-cost, full-day programs that are offered for 5 to 6 weeks over the summer. They also all had small class sizes of no more than 15 students per instructor, and that was for the academic instruction as well as the enrichment instruction. Certified teachers provided that academic instruction, and that was typically offered 3 hours a day, split between reading and mathematics. And they also made efforts to lower barriers to participation. So they offered free meals and free transportation to students who were attending. Now, the study identified 4 primary factors that are related to the effectiveness of summer learning programs: sufficient duration, attendance, quality of instruction, and positive climate. So we found strong evidence that 5-week voluntary summer learning programs can produce short-term gains in mathematics. And we also found that after 2 consecutive summers, students with high attendance, that's 20 days or more per summer, they're outperforming their peers in terms of mathematics and English language arts in the fall and in spring assessments. And they're also displaying stronger social and emotional competencies. We also identified a relationship between the quality of instruction and reading outcomes and the fact that state climate is not surprisingly related to students' enjoyment of the program, but also to students' attendance. So in getting to work on summer, we provide this research-based guidance around a lot of topics that you see listed here that are related to those overarching factors that drive program effectiveness. And I'm going to talk through our recommendations and findings around 4 of those topics that are highlighted in blue. All right, so launching a quality summer program is really akin to launching a school year, only with a lot less time for planning and execution. And so planning affects every single aspect of the summer program. And we found that districts in which the planning process was managed well, there were fewer logistical problems, stronger site management, and all of that led to a more positive site climate, higher quality instruction, better use of time within the day, and stronger student attendance. So it's probably one of our most emphatic recommendations is around planning. However, there are a number of challenges that districts face in terms of planning well and planning early. And so these are some of those. So in lots of districts, there's budget uncertainty that leads to late decisions regarding whether or not to have a summer program. Further, officials are planning summer during the school year, which have pressing and immediate demands on staff. It means there's competition for district expertise that needs to inform the summer planning, such as curriculum experts or human resource personnel. And these school year demands are particularly problematic if no one has dedicated time for summer, and it's really an extra duty placed on top of them, on top of many other school year responsibilities. So to overcome those challenges, we recommend obtaining early commitment from the district and partners for the program and to really engage in a comprehensive planning process. So we found that those who started early and were inclusive were most successful. So we recommend starting ideally in the fall and definitely by January, identifying a lead to manage the cross-functional planning, and particularly somebody who has dedicated time to spend on summer planning and who has some kind of influence and authority among the major stakeholders. Engaging key department subject matter experts and site leaders who are going to be working and leading individual sites is important for planning, as are meeting regularly, being efficient in meetings, and being comprehensive in the scope, really thinking soup to nuts about what it's going to take to put on the program so that the logistics are smooth. And finally, we recommend engaging in a continuous improvement process. So we found that the districts that were able to utilize evaluation data to make year upon year improvements really were able to strengthen their programs over time. The next set of recommendations focuses on student recruitment and attendance. So it's pretty obvious students need to attend programs to benefit them. So it's really not surprising that we find that the greatest benefits from programs accrue to students with strong attendance. So as I mentioned earlier, the high attenders after the second summer benefited in reading and mathematics and had higher in social and emotional competency ratings from teachers. And the school year benefits that we see were stronger when students attended 2 consecutive summers of programming. Now, all this to say, it all takes effort. And from our study, we know that even with that effort, about 10 to 30% of students who signed up never showed up for one day of the program. So that's a kind of a no-show rate that we recommend people plan for. Average daily attendance was around 75% across the districts, and there was variation with some districts obtaining average daily participation rates above 80%. And about half of the students who recruited from the program in the first summer did return in the second. Now, in order to maximize recruiting and maximize strong attendance, we have a number of recommendations. And the combination of recruitment materials, attendance policies, and incentives can really help ensure that students benefit from the program. So we found that developing compelling and accurate recruitment enrollment information for parents is particularly important, and particularly around the accuracy. So you want to make sure that parents and students understand what they are signing up for. Establishing a firm enrollment deadline and a clear attendance policy signals to parents and students that the program can't be treated like a drop-in program. We recommend acknowledging that no-show rate and planning for it in your teacher recruiting and budgeting in order to maximize the number of slots that are available to youth. We found that providing small incentives for students who attended regularly did seem to work, and these were relatively small. We're talking about elementary school students, so they did not have to be large or expensive. They could be like Friday ice cream parties for high attenders, bigger trips at the end of the summer, even things like dance parties got kids kind of excited. And finally, of course, we find this relationship between the site climate, which I'm going to talk about later about how to do this, and attendance, where within districts, those sites with more positive site climate did have stronger average daily attendance rates than sites with inconsistent or poor site climate. So as in the school year, qualified and effective teachers are critical to student success and their experience. And of course, we recommend hiring great teachers with grade level and subject matter expertise, and if possible, familiarity with students, just because it helps them get up and running on the first day of the program. And teachers' content knowledge influences the effectiveness of their instruction, both in academic and enrichment classes. So we saw this not just in our reading classes, but we observed this in like a dance class, which from you say dance class to me, I think that's going to be fun. I want to do that. But the reality is that in the hands of an inexperienced instructor who does not know a lot about dance, that class can become pretty boring and tedious, and not fun at all. So there are a number of challenges that districts in particular face around staff hiring, and one is attracting qualified and motivated applicants. Many teachers, particularly those who principals thought were the most effective, thought that they needed a break during the summer. They were tired and worn out from work during the school year. There's also a perception that some teachers applied to summer programs because they thought that they could take it easy, that it was an easy paycheck. And finally, districts talked about sort of union regulations that sometimes prevented them from hiring the most qualified teachers and most motivated teachers, and were forcing them to rely on people with longer tenure. We did identify a number of promising practices, though, that the districts and their partners were able to utilize. The first was recruiting early. So beginning recruiting in late winter and early spring really helped districts because they were able to attract teachers first, teachers who wanted summer jobs. Advertising the benefits of teaching in the summer. So our survey teachers almost overwhelmingly agreed that they really enjoyed their summer experience. And they talked about things like small class sizes, the availability of strong curricular materials, having a half-day schedule, and departmentalization as benefits of teaching during the summer. And they also were very compelled by the importance of the program to students and how it could improve their achievement and also their access to enrichment opportunities. Many of our districts were able to overcome and negotiate with their unions to have a competitive process for academic teacher selection. And they were able to prioritize content knowledge and grade level experience and utilize things like soliciting recommendations, requiring cover letters, and conducting interviews with teachers in order to suss out these ideas of motivation and affect in order to recruit the most motivated teachers. And then another aspect is around retaining those teachers. So if you have a really good teacher in your summer program, you really want them to come back the next year. And we found that things like the half-day schedules, employing sufficient resources in the program that address students' needs and behavior really helped. So we had one district in the study who had some challenges with student behavior, mainly due to the fact that they had a number of students that they had enrolled with school year IEPs that did not require additional services for the summer months. When they identified that this was an issue and that they were finding a lot of behavior challenges and that some of these students needed additional positive behavioral supports, they hired additional adults for the program to address those needs, and it really made a difference in terms of the site climate, in terms of the teachers' perceptions about the programs and their willingness to come back. And then, of course, ensuring that teachers have all the materials that they need on time when they need them. And finally, I'm going to talk about the site climate, which is really critical. It drives student daily experience and their enjoyment of the program. Sites with consistent positive site climate had clearly established culture for the programs and a common language about its goals. In addition, staff remained positively and actively engaged with students throughout the day, even during transitions from activity to activity. And all of this resulted in higher student attendance. Now, there are a number of challenges for establishing that positive site climate, and they often stem from lack of planning. So we found that poor logistics, such as late buses, a lack of curricular materials, insufficient supplies, unclear changing daily schedules, leads to confused adults. When adults are confused, it's very difficult for them to be positively engaged with youth. So this lack of the shared vision for the program, lack of shared expectations for student behavior led to a choppy and inconsistent experience for students. It's around tone, behavioral expectations, and consequences, which might differ from class to class. So building a positive summer site climate and culture is possible, but it really requires intentionality. And we encourage site leaders to develop a clear, positive message about the summer site culture, to work with staff, train them on the culture of the site, what behavioral expectations are for students, what the expectations are for positive adult engagement throughout the day, not just during class, but in terms of transitions and making connections with children and youth. We recommend that site leaders observe instructional and non-instructional periods so that they are not, so that they're really aware of how their staff are interacting with students and the experience that those students are having in the program. And to provide positive supports for student behavior, particularly for students who may have IEPs during the school year and have need for additional positive student behavior support. So I gave a brief overview of some of those key findings in those 4 areas. We have additional resources that are in the full document, but I am particularly excited that the Wallace Foundation invested in the Learning Agenda, curating resources into a toolkit for the field to complement getting to work on summer learning. And Hillary and Katie are going to walk us through what those are.
Okay, great. I think we're going to transition right into the site. This is Hillary Oravec. Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. We're really excited to have this opportunity to share the Wallace Foundation Summer Learning Toolkit website with you in a way that really showcases its direct connection to the RAND research that Jen just highlighted. In a few moments, my colleague Katie Wilsey and I will take you on a brief tour of the site. And our goal will be to give you a sense of the full suite of resources. I think you just got a glimpse on the slide before. If anything looked really interesting to you, we encourage you to share that in the chat. And we'll also give you a sense of these resources are connected to the RAND research, the work of practitioners, while highlighting a few tools, tip sheets, and samples that may be of interest. At a few points, we'll ask you to weigh in through the chat box function. And before I begin, we're now on the home page of the website at summerlearningtoolkit.org. I want to point out that there's a really fantastic video. You can see it here. We're not going to show it because it doesn't lend itself to a webinar format. But it covers the importance of summer learning, so I think it has some really great talking points that anyone can use. It gives some background on the National Summer Learning Project and the toolkit itself. So we hope you'll check it out after the webinar if you haven't already done so. It's just over 2 minutes and under 3. We'll begin our tour by visiting the About page. You can locate that in several places, but certainly in this top toolbar on the right. And it provides an overview of all the resources available in background on the toolkit. So just a helpful place if you haven't spent much time with the toolkit. So it includes details on who can benefit, so really the audience for this toolkit. It explains that the online resource is based on lessons from districts and partners operating programs for elementary school students, but has broader applicability for principals, national community organizations, and those who operate middle school programs. So we were great to see the group of people here that there's a lot of applicability in this resource for your work in the earlier poll. The How to Start Using the Toolkit section in the accordion has a mini directory that is based on your planning needs and priorities. So it lists some common things that we know people want to make some progress on in planning. So that's just a helpful way to look at topics and go to the resources. There's also some background information, as I mentioned, on the National Summer Learning Project, the program models and partnerships in the RAND study. So it's a quick reference on what we just heard from Jen. And so importantly, at the bottom, it also explains how this toolkit was really developed and reviewed with close input from field practitioners. And so we've heard a lot of excitement about the connection between research and practice and the usefulness of the resources that are on the site. So also on the home page, we're going to scroll back up to the top, or on the About page, and also on the home page, there's a menu of resources. So similar to what we looked at the slide with Jen, that shows the types of resources that you can find on the site. So there's 50 in total, and this really groups them by resource type. So we're going to pause here for a moment so you can kind of take this in, but you'll see, for instance, that we have 4 staff handbooks and 6 summer catalogs from the 5 different cities that participated. And so as we continue through the tour, we'd love to hear from you again if there's anything that you see that sparks your interest. We're taking all this in for future webinars to see what people would really like to explore further. And so with that, I'm going to turn to Katie for the rest of the tour, and I'll continue to connect with you through the chat box.
That's great. Thanks, Hillary. So we're going to go ahead and head back to the home page to get started on our tour. You know, the goal for this brief tour is to really help you understand how the toolkit is organized and to get you excited about the different content and resources that is included. It's going to be a big picture kind of overview of the site. We'll feature a couple of different resources to help pique your interest. hopefully point you in the direction of some things that are relevant for where you are in your summer planning process right now, and then hopefully kind of get you equipped to come back and dig in and navigate the toolkit following today's webinar. So to get started, you'll see that the toolkit is organized around 5 planning areas. We have planning and management, academics and enrichment, staffing and professional development, site climate, and student recruitment and attendance. If we come down a little bit onto the toolkit homepage, you'll also see that there's a direct link to get the full set of recommendations and getting to work on summer learning. Move down a little further, and we're going to talk a little bit about what's included in the toolkit. So again, you can see those 5 planning areas here in the toolkit logo. There's an individual page, as I said, for each of the planning areas. Each page includes guidance that's aligned with RAND's recommendations and also includes related resources, including customizable tools, samples that come from the 5 National Summer Learning Project districts, and tip sheets that were developed by content experts. You'll also see that each resource comes with a guidance document that describes what the resource is and provides tips for effective use. I can't stress enough how much these guidance documents are an excellent entry point for any resource because they include those references to RAND's findings. They have links to getting to work to really help draw that connection between the research and the resource. They also include information about why the resource is important to planning and implementing a quality program. And the tips that are included are based on the experience and perspective of the National Summer Learning Project districts and their partners. And it really focuses on practical ideas on what you want to think about in your planning, draws on their lessons learned about pitfalls to avoid. So this is a great place as you start to get into different resources to get yourself oriented to that particular resource. So if we come down a little bit, I'm going to provide just a quick overview of what each of the 5 planning areas includes, and then we'll turn and kind of highlight those specific areas on each page. So first at the center of the toolkit is planning and management, and this provides customizable tools that really help districts and providers and their partners plan, budget for, sustain, and assess their programs. And we're going to get a chance to look at some of the featured tools when we turn to that page. In academics and enrichment, we're really talking about how can you select and modify curriculum and engage your partners. There's also some great guidance around how to minimize loss of instructional time to make sure that all kids are benefiting throughout the summer. Next, we have staffing and professional development, and this really includes guidance to help providers determine your staff needs and hire selectively, and also how to plan for high-quality professional development. Moving over to site climate, this is really looking at how you can create that welcoming environment that Jen was talking about, and how you can also plan logistics to make sure that students are engaged and that you're maximizing that time for academics and enrichment throughout the summer. And then lastly, we have student recruitment and attendance. This really looks at not only how you recruit students, but how you can help engage them throughout the summer. There's also a link you'll see there to the marketing and recruitment guide that was developed through the National Summer Learning Project and released last spring. And so the toolkit includes several new resources that complement what's already available in the marketing and recruitment guide. So let's go ahead and dig in. I'm going to take us over to planning and management. And what you'll see as we move through the toolkit is that each of the planning pages are organized the same way. And so I'm going to just briefly kind of orient you to how they're structured, and then we'll go ahead and talk about the particular content in each area. So for each content page, you're going to start with an introduction that frames the topic and why it's important. Over on the left, you have a navigation bar that includes the different sections that's related to the planning areas included in this page. Beneath, you have an example milestones for that planning area. So for planning and management is the page that we're on. And this really kind of plots out just a couple of sample tasks or decisions that you might make in this planning area throughout the year. And it's really designed to help promote thinking about a year-round approach to summer planning. Beneath the key milestones timeline is when you start to get into the different sections of the planning page. Each includes some general guidance and tips, and then it includes the related resources, and there's links to download those resources directly from the section. And again, a little chance to look at some things as we go. I'm going to scroll down quickly just to show you at the bottom of every planning page, there's also a link to the resource library where you can navigate resources by topic, or type, and we're going to look at that at the end of our tour. And then there are also links to take you back to the individual pages. So let's talk about what's included in planning and management. We heard from Jen that launching a high quality program takes significant time and resources. And they found that planning process, that a good planning process starts early, at least by January, and that it's engaging staff from both the district or leading organization as well as their partners, and that this meaningful engagement is really going to result in staff that are better prepared and ready to lead a successful program. And so, as I said, that there are 3 primary customizable tools that were developed for the toolkit, and they all live here in planning and management. So we're going to take a look at them as we navigate through these different content areas. So getting it all done, how do you plan such a comprehensive program, as Jen said, when there's limited time and resources for planning? So here we feature the summer planning calendar, and this illustrates a 12-month approach to summer planning, and it includes responsibilities that are shared among organizational, program, and site leaders. It's an editable document that has over 250 planning tasks across 14 different planning areas. And it's really designed to help you formulate your own plan and track your planning process throughout the course of the year. And we're going to touch on different ways that the summer planning calendar can support you in your planning on our tour. Next up, we have Engaging the Right Team, and it features our sustainability planning tools, which are a set of adaptable templates that you can use to support a collaborative sustainability planning process. It includes a self-assessment tool, a strategy document, and an action plan. And this process is helping you think about sustainability at the program level, at the organization and community level, and also thinking about the context that that program exists within. And the third of these customizable tools is the Summer Program Budget Tool, which includes preset formulas that can help you track revenue and project your summer program expenses in major areas like staffing, facilities, and transportation. And then last up in planning and management, and we heard this from Jen about the importance of engaging in continuous improvement process and using data to guide that process. And so what you'll find here in the toolkit are some example observation forms, a customizable observation form for classroom observation, and also a summer program reflection tool, which is designed to help you think about how you can use your data for that end of summer debrief and reflection to kick off your planning for the following year. So I'm going to take us down to our next section, and we'll peek at what's included in academics and enrichment. We know that students are going to spend the majority of their time in either academic or enrichment programming. And so selecting the right curriculum and engaging the right partners is essential to your overall program success. So within academics and enrichment, we have some guidance on how to modify your program curricula and how to go about engaging partners, high quality partners for your enrichment, and also how to make sure that you're maximizing time in your academic and enrichment programming. So RAND found that utilizing a common written curriculum that matches students' academic needs and abilities is really important for high quality instruction. So here in this part of the toolkit, you can find tip sheets on how to select and modify that curricula, and also how to use data to group your students strategically. And the next section that focuses on building partnerships for high quality enrichment. RAND also found, and we heard this from Jen, that enrichment is really key to creating those fun and enjoyable days for students. And so the toolkit provides ideas and resources on how to recruit and select partners that are aligned with your program goals. You can see here that there's an example set of summer enrichment selection materials that's used by Pittsburgh Public Schools Summer Dreamers Academy. So it's a great place if you're looking for an example on a sample RFP, or perhaps a rubric to score the different proposals that you receive from enrichment providers. So I encourage you to kind of click around and check that out when you're navigating the toolkit. And then last piece as we're thinking about academics and enrichment is the importance of minimizing that loss of instructional time. And so there are ideas on how to plan for logistics and also how to prepare staff to just make sure that you're making every minute in your program count. I'm going to move us on, take a peek over in staffing and professional development. So as Jen was talking about in her presentation, there's a strong body of evidence that shows that teaching quality has the largest impact on student outcomes, more than any other school feature. And this is also true for summer learning. And so we know then that a successful program really requires intentionally designed recruitment and hiring processes, and also professional development for staff. And so we're going to take a look at resources that can support you in determining your staffing needs and hiring selectively, and also in developing that high quality professional development. Now, it's likely that you've hired many of your leadership and core staff for your program, although you may be in a position of looking to fill some of your frontline or instructional positions still. Rand found, as we heard from Jen, about that importance of instructors having content knowledge and grade level experience, and that was associated with greater student outcomes in reading and math. So the toolkit has tips and resources to help you think through those staffing needs and how to hire selectively. One exciting resource is that there is a set of 16 sample job descriptions coming out of the programs in Boston and Pittsburgh. You can see a subset here, but I'm going to go ahead and open up the guidance document so you can take a look at the full list. And what's great about this is it's a kind of a set of positions that really range from central office leadership to site level leadership to instructional staff and support staff. So if you are looking to fill any final positions, this might be a great resource to check out. And then many of you may be thinking about your training. And so once you've hired the right staff, the toolkit can offer ideas and resources to support your training and professional development plans. In particular, this tip sheet on planning for high quality professional development gives ideas on how to structure your PD effectively to make sure that you're covering all the essential topics. You can see that there are also sample staff handbooks, which just can provide some inspiration around how you can communicate your expectations through your handbook, but also utilize those as training and professional development resources. And in the summer planning calendar, you'll find that there is a section on professional development, and it provides some nice tips and recommendations for creating and engaging training. So next up on our tour, we're going to take a look at site climate. And we heard in Jen's presentation just about how important it is to create a positive site climate. And they found that the sites in their study that had an inclusive, friendly climate and engaged staff really promoted positive youth experiences and more regular attendance. And so this section of the toolkit offers ideas on how you can build your program's climate through staff and youth relationships and strong engagement practices. Down here in the creating a warm and welcoming environment section, you'll see that there's a tip sheet focused on promoting student participation and positive experiences. And it provides tips on how to market your program effectively, how to create that warm and welcoming environment, and how to also meet the particular needs of your families. There's also great information about how to prepare your staff to promote your program's culture and to really build those positive relationships with youth. And again, there's more examples of staff handbooks and how those expectations and kind of priorities around staff-youth relationships are communicated throughout these resources. And finally, we know that a critical aspect to positive site climate is having a program that runs smoothly. And the summer program, or the summer planning calendar, includes a focus on planning logistics, such as transportation or scheduling and supplies. And so this is a great place if you're looking for some support in this home stretch of planning for your program's launch and implementation, to take a look at those sections. And then last stop in terms of our planning areas is to take a look at what's included in student recruitment and attendance. So we heard again, that Rand found that students needed to attend 20 days of programming to experience academic benefits. And they found that timing and messages and messengers were all critical components of a successful student recruitment effort. So the toolkit can provide ideas on how to reach your families and how to use data, attendance data in particular, to keep youth engaged. You'll see here, there's the link to the marketing and recruitment guide that I mentioned earlier. And the marketing and recruitment guide, among many other resources, it includes sample messages that you can tailor to your program's mission and goals. And then within the toolkit, you can also find these sample planning catalogs that Hillary was mentioning when we looked at the resource sheet. And these can give great information and inspiration for how you might package and share the most important information about your program offerings to families. Then we also hear from many programs that setting up a successful attendance tracking system can be challenging. And if you're among those who are experiencing that challenge, we encourage you to check out the Boston Summer Attendance Tracker. It provides a really easy to replicate format and guidance on tracking attendance across multiple sites and how to use that daily attendance tracking to spot problems so that staff can really focus on personalized outreach to absent students and families to make sure that more kids are attending regularly. And if you are kind of moving through your recruitment process right now, the summer planning calendar can help you map out some of that student recruitment plan and how to build procedures that support that positive youth engagement throughout the summer. And so the last stop on our tour before we kind of open up for questions and ideas from the group is to take a look at the resource library. So this link again is at the bottom of every planning page. And this takes you into the full set of resources. We heard there's 50 in the toolkit and they're bundled together in a couple different packages. When you get to the library, everything's alphabetical, so you'll see some of the examples from Boston popping up first. But you can search the resources in a couple of ways. You can search by keyword. So for example, if you wanted to see everything related to enrichment, you could look for that this way. You can also sort the resources by planning area. So you can see all the resources related to the 5 areas that we just previewed. You can also sort by resource type. So if you wanted to see all the district samples, you could look for that. And then every resource in the toolkit is kind of tagged to a time of year that it might be important to your planning process. And so you can also filter the resources for the season or the time that you might use them. So I'm going to pause there. I think we're going to open it up to some conversation and questions.
And Katie, this is Hillary. I've been answering some questions in chat as we've been going. I see that there's some questions in the Q&A box, and I may have skipped over Jen's opportunity to respond to questions. So I want to check in with Leslie.
So yes, we're going to pause now for some time for some Q&A. Just wanted to note that the toolkit can be found, as well as the Getting to Work on Summer Learning report can be found in the Wallace Foundation's Knowledge Center. So yes, we have some time now for some questions for our speakers. So if you want to go ahead and type those in the Q&A box so we can see them. I'm going to try to go back through some of the questions that were placed into the chat box as well. First question is the toolkit a free resource to providers?
I see that in a few places in the Q&A. Yes, it's free and open source, and you're welcome to reach out to us if you could use any help utilizing it in your work. So we definitely encourage you to get on there and share it with all the summer providers that you're connected with.
All right. Next question, did the toolkits have activities that are hands-on? And then kind of related, are there templates that can be personalized for our facility?
Yes, so there are at least 4 tools within the toolkit that are meant for you to customize to your own planning process. There's the calendar that Katie hit on a few times. There's a budget tool. It has a lot of different areas for consideration, pretty great tool to check out. There is a program reflection template. So how do you look at all the data that you're collecting over the summer and at the end of the summer to start to organize a debrief with staff. And then finally, there are some tools for sustainability planning. And we'll be highlighting those at the Ready by 21 conference in April. We'll also be doing a deep dive on the calendar at the National After School Association Conference in March and focus on staffing and hiring for our next webinar on March 28th.
Great, thanks. More a question comment here. As a free resource and support specialist to any summer programs in the 10-county radius, I would love to have a list of free resources to give to these programs to help with any summer programming, whether it's toolkits, webinars, resources, etc.
Okay, I think the list that we showed early on in the webinar, it's linked to on the homepage. It's linked on this page as well, in the About page, but it will list out the different types of resources. I think this is probably the best way to share with people what's available if you want to make this available and code it to people who are planning programs. And so again, you see all the tools listed, you see all the tip sheets and the samples.
So we have a question about receiving an invite to the next webinar. So yes, we're going to be sending out invites to the next 2 webinars starting next week. So you'll receive a link to register for those soon. So again, if you have any questions that you want to ask, go ahead and type those into the Q&A box.
I'm curious if people have questions for Jen McCombs on the RAND study in particular.
So there was a question in the chat box, comment, I'm a branch librarian in an urban public library. Have other libraries used this toolkit in the library as opposed to a program in a school or partnering with a school?
So this is Hillary. This resource was launched in early December, and so I think we're still learning from everyone who's using it in their work. And so I would imagine that there are libraries that are accessing and referencing resources. I mentioned in the chat earlier that, I think that a lot of the resources on all the pages are certainly applicable, or there's pieces of them that are applicable. It's certainly helpful to know what your partners in the community are doing to programs, but I would definitely check out the site climate page in the student recruitment and attendance page. All of those resources are certainly applicable to all summer settings.
There's another question. Is there contact information available for the benchmarked urban districts, particularly interested in Pittsburgh as I live in the region?
Yes, I mentioned earlier that I'd be happy to connect on the individual email if in the chat. And the good news is that our next webinar in late March on staffing and professional development will be joined by 2 of our colleagues from both Pittsburgh Public Schools and the Allegheny Partners for Out of School Time, Melanie Claxton and Catherine Vargas as co-presenters. They're going to share their approaches to staffing and professional development from everyone from their site leadership to teachers, to community partners and enrichment staff. So that should be a really good conversation where you can see how some of the resources come to life and be able to interact with some of the providers and practitioners upon which this is based.
Another question we have summer camps used this program?
Is the question about summer camps using the program or the resources?
I think maybe the toolkit, the resources.
So I think, again, it's similar to the libraries. There are lots of resources on here that are applicable in multiple settings. And so this was developed, informed by the work of districts and their partners. And so there are certainly things that are applicable beyond that. And so I would encourage, again, to take a look at the resources. There are several things. We built in prompts for people from types of models to think about how to adapt it for their own program type and setting. I think the calendar is a great example of that. So we have a number of prompts of whether you're a single site or multiple sites, and who do you need to bring together as a part of the planning process to really set up how you approach that specific tool. So we definitely took into mind trying to make this as applicable as possible in as many settings as possible.
Okay, great. I see a couple other questions about the cost for the toolkit. So it is a free resource. Another question from the chat box. I'm sure literacy is a focus in the ELA portion of the program. Do any of the 5 schools have a particular emphasis on literacy, for example, grade level reading assessments?
So each of the districts did include a focus on literacy. So they typically had 1.5 to 2 hours of reading instruction. And each of them took a different approach based on their curriculum in the district was. And so there were some that adapted the current curriculum that they have during the school year and had an extra module that was adopted during the summer. Others adopted an off-the-shelf curriculum that was aligned to their standards. They tended to focus, these were students who were rising 4th and 5th graders, so they tended to be pretty comprehensive programs that focused on reading comprehension and writing as well. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I think that.
Yeah, and I think that the toolkit has some nice resources around selecting a curricula and how to think about that.
So I have a question about the resources again. The free resources are websites for summer curriculum plans to follow.
So the tip sheet that Jen McCombs was just talking about, you can find on academics and enrichment. It's a tip sheet on selecting and modifying curricula. There's also one on using data to group students. And so I think that those will be particularly helpful. The third one in that set, just to mention, is on planning a high quality professional development session. So what should you take into consideration? I imagine that we'll hit on that quite a bit in late March on the next webinar.
Great. We have a few more questions I'm going to try to go through, but if anybody has a question for Jen, Katie, or Hillary, go ahead and type that into the Q&A box so you can see it. There's a question, are English language learners considered in the design of the program plan / curriculum?
So the answer is yes. So the curricula should be based on student needs. And in particular, Dallas had a program for ELL. They had a high proportion of English language learners in their program, and also had some bilingual classes.
Great. We have a question about service learning. I have incorporated service learning into our summer program. Is this a feature in any of the programs?
Jen, are you able to answer that?
Yeah, I am. So service learning was not an explicit focus of the programs that that we studied and observed. However, I think that that's actually a very promising activity during the summer months. So I don't think that we have specific examples around how that was implemented. However, I do think that a lot of the resources and the thinking about how to approach a curricula, how to think about the variety of activities, and sort of the planning and intentionality have direct relationship to a service learning model as well.
And similarly related, there was a question about using the toolkit for intergenerational programs, which is another kind of specific type of program. Katie, Hillary,
I'm just reading this. So I think the question is about whether we've applied the toolkit guidelines within year-round or balanced calendars. And so the answer is no. We released this in early December. The foundation released both Getting to Work on Summer Learning and the kit in early December. So the toolkit right now, Katie, do you mind jumping in to say the calendar, how it's set up to like assume that are starting, I believe, in early July. But we do have a number of assumptions in some specific tools, and I'm going to hear her because she's the best person to answer that part.
Yeah, so the calendar is set up for programs that might begin in late June. And so there's guidance in there about, you know, modifying that and being one of the first steps that you take to what your school and summer timeline is. I'd be happy to share that directly. You can also, the calendar, you can download it, the workbook, and it lays out, you can kind of see a nice 12-month summary that lays out the key planning areas across the year. And, you know, you can think about how that might shift for you, particularly looking at like a year-round model.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Phyllis, we'd be happy to follow up with you on more specifics about that and kind of our perspectives on what might need to change if you were going to use that in a balanced schedule.
Great. So there was actually a question that was asked earlier. Could this toolkit be used for intergenerational programs? probably programs working with youth and their parents or families?
Yeah, I think that the plan, so this is really focused on high quality planning. So I think that it's certainly applicable to intergenerational programs. You know, it walks you through a number of planning considerations. I think in addition to the resources on student recruitment and attendance, for instance, you would need to think about, you know, how to apply those resources where you're really trying to target multiple audiences to entice them to, you know, participate in the program. So again, I think that there is a lot of applicability, but you'll just need to think through how to tweak some of the things to make it most applicable to your own setting.
Thanks. So there's a question about accessing the recording. Yes, we will be making the recording and the slides available to everybody who registers for the webinar, and it'll also be available on our respective websites. So we have time for a couple more questions if you want to go ahead and type those in. You see the chat box. Thanks, Phyllis, for volunteering to share your curriculum, your service learning curriculum with the group. So before we close out with announcements and anything, I just want to give Jennifer and Hillary and Katie a chance to say any kind of last thoughts.
So this is Jennifer, and I just want to thank everybody for listening in. If anyone has additional questions about the research or the models or what we found in terms of the implementation or outcome study, I'm happy to field questions later on. People are more than welcome to email me or set up a time to talk. And I just want to particularly say how excited I am about the toolkit and learning materials. It's not very often that we're able to produce research that ends up having a companion piece that is so useful to practitioners and really helps them inform their practice. So thanks to Hillary and Katie.
And likewise, it was wonderful to collaborate. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Again, really encourage you to come back and join us on March 28th. I believe there's another poll opportunity to weigh in on a topic for a third webinar on April 10th. So we'd love to hear from you kind of based on what you saw in the toolkit today. What types of topics would be most helpful to you at that point in your planning process? So I left our emails in the chat box. We're happy to connect with any of you and just really appreciate your time and interest in getting to work on Summer and the toolkit.
Great. Thanks again, everyone, for the great questions. I have some quick announcements before we close out. Just a reminder, as we've been talking about, we have 2 more webinars in the series coming up. Part 2 will be on March 28th. We'll take a closer look with the learning agenda at the area of staffing and professional development to examine how to hire and train the best possible staff that suits the specific climate, culture, and goals of your summer program. We'll also be joined by representatives, as we mentioned, from the Pittsburgh Public Schools Summer Dreamers Academy, who will share their firsthand experience with the summer program hiring process and best practices to optimize professional development opportunities. So you'll see a link for that in the chat box to register, but we'll also be circulating that after the webinar. And the next webinar will be hosted through the After School Alliance's webinar platform. We also want to hear from you to help decide the focus of the third webinar. We put together a short survey to collect your ideas for that. If you'd like to help decide on the topic, the link for that is in the chat box as well. We want you to keep in touch. Here's a link to our host websites and social media. That's the best way to make sure you don't miss out on any new resources and announcements. And I'll share one announcement now. NSLA is expanding our National Summer Learning Day to a National Summer Learning Week. Summer Learning Week is a celebration dedicated to advocacy and awareness aimed at elevating the importance of keeping kids safe, learning, and healthy over the summer. ensuring that they return to school in the fall ready to succeed in the year. So this year it will be July 8th through the 13th. So look out for more information on that in the weeks to come. Please be sure to complete the feedback survey that will pop up after this webinar. It will help inform future webinars. Thank you again for joining us today. I hope you found this informative and will take away some tips and strategies to help plan an excellent summer program. Thanks again to our guest speakers, Jennifer McCombs, Katie Wilsey, Hillary Orvek, my co-host, the National After School Association and the After School Alliance, and our sponsor, the Wallace Foundation. We'll see you on the next webinar, March 28th. Goodbye.